Okay, so this presentation on the Muslim achievements corresponds to that activity that we did in class, where we looked at the documents that discussed some of their achievements, also kind of comparing to the West at this point. And while we've also discussed in class that different civilizations at different time in history are kind of the leader of innovation, but I think sometimes Europeans forget that other civilizations have also contributed quite a bit to their understanding of the world. And so I think no more than I think the Muslims, right? They brought in the information from China and India and helped spread it, that created some of the foundations of European thought. So, what motivated a lot of Muslims in these achievements, it was intended to help not only their fellow followers practice their faith, but also to celebrate their faith. So we'll start with medicine. I think medicine and math kind of can be tied as some of the most important contributions of Muslims. And so they were motivated to develop medicine, right, as it says here, in accordance with their religious beliefs, but also to practically to keep their rulers healthy. And probably the most famous of Muslim doctors or medical practitioners was Al-Razi. So if you look him up, I mean, you name it, he wrote about it, like hundreds of manuscripts. Here's a little scrap of one. And I came across this quote of an English historian who considers him one of probably the greatest and most original of all the physicians, and one of the most prolific as an author. So, name a topic in modern medicine, Al-Razi was writing about it, hundreds of years before many others. And here are some early medical instruments, medical tools. So they wrote texts. The concepts of hospitals today were developed here by Al-Razi. So I found this article. You know me, I try to keep my images from Wikipedia as for common use. However, I came across these great pictures from an article or website that publishes, I guess, medical papers or studies. So I stole his pictures. And so I thought these were really fascinating. So this is from the 13th century, right? That shows an early cataract surgery. This is, I think, from the Turkish area of the Islamic Empire of some oral surgery. And then this is an artist rendition, an artist more modern times, their rendition of Islamic doctors practicing early anesthesia. So this man did a lot of research and contributed these cool pictures. So, astronomy, then, another great area of Islamic achievement. So this, as we discussed, as they practice fasting and prayer, they had to, so the Islamic calendar is a lunar calendar, so it shifts throughout the year, and to also which direction to pray, right, towards Mecca. So astronomy was also important in fulfilling part of their religious beliefs. So the astrolabe they got from the Hellenistic areas of the Mediterranean, and so they perfected it. And so this is probably more modern. I think maybe the 1700s from Persia, astrolabe that helps you map the sky. And they charted the eclipses and the Earth's rotation. So here's an illustration, right, of the phases of the moon. And then this is from more, as we would consider, early modern or depiction in the Ottoman Empire, right, of astronomers in Istanbul. So some of these tools, right, they'll pass on to the Europeans, which will help them explore the oceans. Oh, and I forgot. And I just realized I forgot to cite who made this, but it's a famous map from about the 1100s. And so part of their skills with kind of astronomy and the astrolabe, they were very good in cartography or map making. And so here's one of their earlier maps that you can see, right? What's missing? Of course, the Americas, but you can see it's not bad. Okay, also we've talked a lot about art and architecture, and we'll look at some examples. But they developed art and architecture to celebrate God, Allah, and we'll look at some designs of calligraphy and geometric designs. So remember, for Muslims, they don't put a lot of human representation in their art, especially of Muhammad or religious figures. Only Allah can create life. And also, this circles back to our, remember when we talked about the Byzantine disagreements or discussions about icons. So the Byzantines were also influenced by this Islamic belief of they didn't want their people to worship images, even though eventually icons will be built into religious practices in Eastern Christianity, not so much to worship, but as ways to help people practice their faith. And then we've looked, probably their main or most famous architecture are the mosques. We've looked at some pictures throughout our presentations, which are some stunning buildings, but we'll focus in this presentation on the Dome of the Rock Mosque, or the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. And then part of their architecture, I guess, or part of their engineering skills were water wheels and windmills. So these are a little bit different from what we might have expected. And so these are some artistic renderings of what they think were some of the first Persian windmills. So they have these sails, and they were, I don't know, not quite what we imagine from Europe. I thought it was kind of interesting. Okay, so we've looked at this before, but quite a stunning picture. So 691 CE, this was built as the Umayyads then moved into Jerusalem. And remember, this is built over the mount there where Muhammad received his, from that point, he received his revelation of heaven. And then we've seen this, but I thought this is a really nice picture, kind of up close, of the mosque in Cordoba, which I know you remember is in Spain. But take a look at this. So you've got the arches here, but clearly math or geometry or something's at play here, which I'll let your math teachers decide, because that's my weak area. But again, very cool. Okay, another famous edifice is the Alhambra, also in Islamic Spain, in Granada. This was a castle and then a fortress built in the 1300s. And so you can see, right, while there's decoration, but remember no human images, perhaps maybe animals, but you can see the Arabic used as decoration, and then a close-up of the arabesque, these geometric patterns and carvings that I just can't imagine what that might look like up close, but perhaps some of you have seen it. And so these are some of the other artwork. So you can see sometimes figures, right, of animals are depicted with the Arabic design. And geometric patterns, right, are the common then forms of Islamic art. So literature, we've talked a little bit about this as from the heritage of their Bedouin foundations of storytelling and poetry, and probably one of the most famous, right, we've talked about is 1001 Nights, or Arabian Nights as it's often known in English. And so it tells the story of Scheherazade, who married the Caliph of the Abbasid dynasty. And this guy shows kind of the weakness of the Abbasid caliphs at this point, right? Was paranoid and had killed his previous wives and thought everyone was out to get him. And so Scheherazade, then tells a story each night to spare her life. And so she always was clever to leave it on a cliffhanger as day began, so he would have to wait, to hear the rest of the story on the next night. And so eventually, right, he'll be charmed by her and they live happily ever after. But a lot of the stories we know from this time period, Aladdin, what is it? Who goes to the cave of treasures and open sesame, right? And the genies and bottles and all those great stories come from 1001 Nights, which depicted also a lot about what court life was under the Abbasids in Baghdad. And probably the most famous of the writers of this time is Rumi. He is a Sufi poet, remember the mystical branch of Islam, and he probably, even today, I think, has quite a following. And then, of course, the Quran. So this is a depiction of Rumi and his admirers. So here's a poem that I thought was really interesting, and I'll let you pause and just read this. I thought, even though it was written so long ago, I think it really could speak to us today. So feel free to pause and let it sink in. Okay, so education and philosophy, as we read in our DBQ activity, was very important for the Muslims, and they sought knowledge because Muhammad believed that it would light their way to heaven. They created universities. Some believe this is one of the oldest still operating universities in the world in Cairo. They collected and translated philosophical texts. They also collected Greek, right, texts and Roman texts. This they will transmit back to the Europeans once they're ready. And then I think most of our classes we saw about the use of paper, right, that they took that from China and innovated it. And so the rest of the world got their use of paper through the Muslims. And of course, I've mentioned my favorite, the House of Wisdom, right, in Baghdad under the golden age of the Abbasids, right, where people from all over the world would come and talk and discuss. And so here, just to show you that their connection with the Greeks, this is a depiction of Aristotle and his students. Okay, and of course, like I said, we'll end with probably their other great contribution with math and then modern finance. We've mentioned already about banking, as they have these vast trade networks. They came up with lines of credit and checks to increase trade as people were coming from all over parts of the world with different coinage. And then mathematics, they believed, was the basis of all knowledge. And so algebra, right, was their contribution to the study of math, which I told you, grr, why do they have to torment me this way? But I know many of you love it, and I know it's useful. And numerals starting from 0. And the math teachers, ask your math teachers about this. They like to nerd out about this as much as I nerd out about other things and how important these things are and how the Arabs contribute to this. So I Googled algebra, and this is what came up. Perhaps you know what that means. But one of the great mathematicians here, these are some of his early fragments of algebra. So there you have it. Oh, remember our number system that they got from India. So enjoy, ponder, and Rumi for sure will be on the test, but some of this information will help you answer all kinds of questions.